Okay. Continuing chapter 9 because it got interrupted. And a little tiny red monkey who was sitting up in a tree shouted down, "I think that too." And then they all cried out, making a great noise, "Yes, yes, let's give him the finest present ever given." Now they began to wonder and ask one another what would be the best thing to give him. And one said, 50 bags of coconuts, and another, 100 bunches of bananas. At least he shall not have to buy his fruit in the land where you pay to eat. But Chi-Chi told them that all these things would be too heavy to carry so far, and would go bad before half was eaten. "If you want to please him," he said, "give him an animal. You may be sure he will be kind to it. Give him some rare animal they have not got in the menageries." The menageries are like the zoos. And the monkeys asked him, "What are menageries?" And Chi-Chi explained to them that menageries were places in the land of the Europeans where animals were put in cages for people to come and look at. And the monkeys were very shocked, and they said to one another, "These men are like thoughtless young ones, stupid and easily amused. Shh! It is a prison, he means." So then they asked Chi-Chi what rare animal it could be that they should give the doctor. One of his countrymen had not seen before, one that his countrymen had not seen before. And the major of the marmosets asked, "Have they an iguana over there?" But Chi-Chi said, "Yes, there is one in the London Zoo." And another asked, "Have they an okapi?" But Chi-Chi said, "Yes, in Belgium, where my organ grinder took me 5 years ago, they had an okapi in a big city they called Antwerp." And another asked, "Have they a push-me-pull-you?" Then Chi-Chi said, "No, no foreign man has ever seen a push-me-pull-you. Let's give him that." Chapter 10, The Rarest Animal of All. Push-me-pull-yous are now extinct. That means there aren't any more. But long ago, when Dr. Dolittle was alive, there were some of them still left in the deepest jungles of Africa. And even then they were very, very scarce. They had no tail, but a head at each end, and sharp horns on each head. Can you imagine that? Oh, here's a picture of a push-me-pull-you. They have two heads, one at this end and one at the other end. So it says, they had no tail but a head at each end and sharp horns on each head. They were very shy and terribly hard to catch. The Africans get most of their animals by sneaking up behind them while they are not looking. But you could not do this with the push-me-pull-you, because no matter which way you came toward him, he was always facing you. And besides, only one half of him slept at a time. The other head was always awake and watching. This was why they were never caught and never seen in zoos. Though many of the greatest huntsmen and the cleverest zookeepers spent years of their lives searching through the jungles in all weather for push-me-pull-yous, not a single one had ever been caught. Even then, years ago, he was the only animal in the world with two heads. Well, the monkeys set out hunting for this animal through the forest, and after they had gone a good many miles, one of them found a peculiar footprints near the edge of a river, and they knew that a push-me-pull-you must be very near that spot. Then they went along the bank of the river a little way, and they saw a place where the grass was high and thick, and they guessed that he was in there. So they all joined hands and made a great circle around the high grass. The push-me-pull-you heard them coming, and he tried hard to break through the ring of monkeys, but he couldn't do it. When he saw that it was no use trying to escape, he sat down and waited to see what they wanted. They asked him if he would go with Dr. Dolittle and be put on show, but he shook both of his heads hard and said, "Certainly not." They explained to him that he would be shut up in a menagerie, but he would not be shut up in a menagerie, but would just be looked at. They told him that the doctor was a very kind man, but hadn't any money, and people would pay to see a two-headed animal, and the doctor would get rich and could pay for the boat he had borrowed to come to Africa in. But he answered, "No, you know how shy I am. I hate being stared at." And he almost began to cry. Then for 3 days they tried to persuade him. And at the end of the 3rd day he said he would come with them and see what kind of a man the doctor was first. So the monkeys traveled back with the push-me-pull-you, and when they came to where the doctor's little house of grass was, they knocked at the door. The duck, who was packing the trunk, said, "Come in," and Chee-Chee very proudly took the animal inside and showed him to the doctor. "What in the world is this?" asked John Dolittle, gazing at the strange creature. "Lord save us," cried the duck. "How does it make up its mind?" "It doesn't look to me as though it had any," said Jip the dog. "This, doctor," said Chee-Chee, "is the push-me-pull-you, the rarest animal of the African jungles, with the only two-headed beast in the world. Take him home with you, and your fortune's made. People will pay you any money to see him." "But I don't want any money," said the doctor. "Yes, you do," said Dab-Dab the duck. "Don't you remember how we had to pinch and scrape to pay the butcher's bill in Puddleby? And how are you going to get the sailor the new boat you spoke of, unless we have the money to buy it?" "I was going to make him one," said the doctor. "Oh, do be sensible," cried Dab-Dab. "Where would you get all the wood and the nails to make one with? And besides, what are we going to live on? We shall be poorer than ever when we get back. Chee-Chee's perfectly right. Take the funny-looking thing along, do." "Well, perhaps there is something in what you say," murmured the doctor. "It certainly would make a nice new kind of pet. But does the what do you call it, really want to go abroad?" "Yes, I'll go," said the push-me-pull-you, who saw at once from the doctor's face that he was a man to be trusted. "You have been so kind to the animals here, and the monkeys tell me that I am the only one who will do. But you must promise me that if I do not like it in your country, you will send me back." "Why, certainly, of course," said the doctor. "Excuse me, surely you are related to the deer family, are you not?" "Yes," said the push-me-pull-you, "to the Abyssinian gazelles and the Asiatic chamois on my mother's side. My father's great-grandfather was the last of the unicorns." "Ah, most interesting," murmured the doctor, and he took a book out of his trunk, which Dab-Dab was packing, and began turning the pages. "Let us see if Buffon says anything." "I notice," said the duck, "that you talk with only one of your mouths. Can't the other head talk as well?" "Oh, yes," said the push-me-pull-you, "but I keep the other mouth for eating, mostly. In that way I can talk while I'm eating without being rude." That's funny. "Other people have always been very polite, so while one of his mouths is eating, he can still talk. But both sides can talk." When the packing was finished and everything was ready to start, the monkeys gave a grand party for the doctor, and all the animals of the jungle came. And they had pineapples and mangoes and honey and all sorts of good things to eat and drink. After they had finished eating, the doctor got up and said, "Friends, I am not clever at speaking long words after dinner, like some men, and I have just eaten many fruits and much honey. But I wish to tell you that I am very sad at leaving your beautiful country." Because I have things to do in the land of the Europeans, I must go. After I have gone, remember never to let the flies settle on your food before you eat it, and do not sleep on the ground when the rains are coming. I hope you will all live happily ever after." When the doctor stopped speaking and sat down, all the monkeys clapped their hands a long time and said to one another, "Let it be remembered always among our people that he sat and ate with us here under the trees, for surely he is the greatest of men." And the grand gorilla, who had the strength of 7 horses in his hairy arms, rolled a great rock up to the head of the table and said, "This stone for all time shall mark the spot." And even to this day, in the heart of the jungle, that stone is still there. And monkey mothers, passing through the forest with their families, still point down at it from the branches and whisper to their children, "Shh, there it is. Look, where the good doctor sat and ate food with us in the year of the great sickness." Then, when the party was over, the doctor and his pets started out to go back to the seashore, and all the monkeys went with him as far as the edge of their country, carrying his trunk and bags to see him off. That was a good chapter, huh? This is chapter 11. The Prince. By the edge of the river they stopped and said farewell. This took a long time because all those thousands of monkeys wanted to shake Dolittle by the hand. Afterward, when the doctor and his pets were going on alone, Polynesia said, "We must tread softly and talk low, as we are going through the land of the Jolliginki. If the king should hear us, he will send his soldiers to catch us again, for I am sure he is still very angry over the trick I played on him." "What I am wondering," said the doctor, "is where we are going to get another boat." That's what I was wondering. "To go home in." "Oh, well, perhaps we'll find one lying on the beach that nobody is using. Never lift your foot till you come to the stile." One day, while they were passing through a very thick part of the forest, Chi-Chi went ahead of them to look for coconuts. And while he was away, the doctor and the rest of the animals, who did not know the jungle path so well, got lost in the deep woods. They wandered around and around, but could not find their way down to the seashore. Chi-Chi, when he could not see them any more, was terribly upset. He climbed high trees and looked out from the top branches to try and see the doctor's high hat. He waved and shouted. He called all the animals by name, but it was no use. They seemed to have disappeared altogether. Indeed, they had lost their way very badly. They had strayed a long way off the path, and the jungle was so thick with bushes and creepers and vines that sometimes they could hardly move at all, and the doctor had to take out his pocket knife and cut his way along. They stumbled into wet, boggy places. They got all tangled up in thick, convolvulus runners. They scratched themselves on thorns, and twice they nearly lost the medicine bag in the underbrush. There seemed no end to their troubles, and nowhere they could come upon a path. At last, after blundering about like this for many days, getting their clothes torn and their faces covered with mud, they walked right into the king's back garden by mistake. Uh-oh. The king's men came running up at once and caught them. But Polynesia flew into a tree in the garden without anybody seeing her and hid herself. The doctor and the rest were taken before the king. "Ha ha!" cried the king. "So you are caught again. This time you shall not escape. Take them all back to prison and put double locks on the door. This man shall scrub my kitchen floor for the rest of his life." So the doctor and his pets were led back to the prison and locked up, and the doctor was told that in the morning he must begin scrubbing the kitchen floor. They were all very unhappy. "This is a great nuisance," said the doctor. "I really must get back to Puddleby. That poor sailor will think I've stolen his ship. If I don't get home soon, I wonder if those hinges are loose. But the door was very strong and firmly locked. There seemed no chance of getting out. Then Gub-Gub began to cry again. Gub-Gub remembers the pig. All this time Polynesia was still sitting in the tree in the palace garden. She was saying nothing and blinking her eyes. This was always a very bad sign with Polynesia. Whenever she said nothing and blinked her eyes, it meant that somebody had been making trouble, and she was thinking about some way to put things right. People who made trouble for Polynesia and her friends were nearly always sorry for it afterwards. Presently she spied Chee-Chee swinging through the trees, still looking for the doctor. When Chee-Chee saw her, he came into her tree and asked what had become of him. "The doctor and all the animals have been caught by the king's men and locked up again," whispered Polynesia. "We lost our way in the jungle and blundered into the palace garden by mistake." "But couldn't you guide them?" asked Chee-Chee, and he began to scold the parrot for letting them get lost while he was away looking for the coconuts. "It was all that stupid pig's fault," said Polynesia. "He kept running off the path hunting for ginger root, and I was kept so busy catching him and bringing him back that I turned to the left instead of the right when we reached the swamp." "Shh! Look! There's Prince Bumpo coming into the garden. He must not see us. Don't move, whatever you do." And there, sure enough, was Prince Bumpo, the king's son, opening the garden gate. He carried a book of fairy tales under his arm. He came strolling down the gravel walk, humming a sad song, till he reached a stone seat right under the tree where the parrot and the monkey were hiding. Then he lay down on the seat and began reading the fairy stories to himself. Chee-Chee and Polynesia watched him, keeping very quiet and still. "Chee-Chee," Polynesia whispered, "I have an idea. Maybe I can hypnotize him." "What good will that do?" Chee-Chee whispered back. "When you've been hypnotized, you sort of go to sleep, and you'll do whatever you've been told to do, even after you wake up. If I can put the prince in a trance, I'll tell him to unlock the prison and let the doctor out." "Well, it's worth a try," Chee-Chee said. "How will you do it?" "Just watch me and don't move," Polynesia whispered. And she slid very quietly down the branch on which she was perched until she was closer to the prince. Clutching a smaller twig, she slowly began waving it in front of him and making a low humming sound with her throat. She's hypnotizing him with a twig. Prince Bumpo saw the twig swinging to and fro, and soon his eyes started to close. After a moment, Polynesia spoke in a quiet, soothing voice. "Bumpo, Prince Bumpo, there is something you must do." Prince Bumpo smiled gently in his sleep. "In thy father's prison," said the parrot, "there lies a famous wizard, John Dolittle by name. Many things he knows of medicine and magic, and mighty deeds has he performed. Yet thy kingly father leaves him languishing long and lingering hours. Go to him, brave Bumpo, secretly when the sun has set. But first prepare him a ship in which he may sail away, far from these unfriendly shores. Then go and unlock the prison doors. Let the great wizard and his animals go free." Again, the sleeping prince smiled. Okay, that's the end of the 11th chapter.